Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live-ish right here on Facebook from under a almost full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. We're going to see how this goes this evening. The last alternative I have other than kidnapping a geek person and having them come look at the equipment out here is to pre-record the show and play it at 7 o'clock Central and 8 o'clock Eastern Time. So we might slip into doing that. You never know. Hey, Freddie and Karen and Michelle are already in the house. Hopefully, we're not going to have any issues tonight. But yeah, I think I'm already seeing lagging on my end. I'm so tired of techie shit. But I keep trying. Like I just said, I think I'm going to start pre recording the show and playing it at 7 o'clock. And that way I can join in the conversation with you guys and make fun of myself right along with y'all. All right, so big shout out. Oh, Karen says, I can see you and hear you. That's got to be scary. You're a brave girl, my redheaded sister. So, shout out, like I said, to all my sponsors, those friendly folks over at Big Time Vapes in Picayune, Mississippi. You can find them at 711 Memorial Boulevard. You can also find them here on Facebook. They have the best mods, equipment, and juice, custom blends, and of course, premium store order blend. It's store bought, but I like their custom blends. They have like hundreds and hundreds of flavors, and they are incredible. So try them out. They do ship. So if you're having problems getting equipment and supplies and the juice you need with your level of nicotine at your favorite vape shop, I bet you my girls over there at Big Time Vapes can hook you up. Like I said, they ship, so get in touch with them. Tell them the creepy chick sent you. Also, a big shout out to Little Coffee Shop of Horrors. 54 and counting different blends of coffee. They are just incredible. I haven't had one yet that I don't like. Check them out at coffeeshopofhorrors.com. Create you an account there, go shopping, pick up some of those sample packs. They're freaking incredible. I bought the sample packs for Keurig. Kane is downstairs preaching right now, so yeah. It's going to be interesting. He's very pissed off right now. I had to put a child gate up because he's not scared of the stairs. So yeah, Coffee Shop of Horrors. Create you an account, go shopping, and before you check out, use code EDGE2020 and you'll get 10% off of your entire order. Also, Wrought Ink, that's the guys that make those crazy New Orleans and Louisiana urban legend t-shirts. They are a mom and pop in New Orleans, so yeah, never a better time than now to support small local businesses. Get in touch with them. Go to authorlyngibson.com, click on my sponsors link, and you can go straight to them. Discount code for them, 10% off. Use Horror Queen. You're definitely going to see something you have to have if you go shopping on their Etsy site. That's for sure. And of course, last but certainly not least, Naked Wines. That's right. This is a wonderful pink Zinfandel or pink Moscato, I think, that I have become addicted to. I've given up my red wines. I'm liking the pink. It's awesome. Definitely. Naked Wines. I have those voucher numbers, $100 off your first order. They ship. Nothing like opening your door and finding a case of wine sitting there for you. Check them out. If you want that discount code, let me know. I'll be happy to send that to you. Naked Wines. Drink enough. Somebody's getting naked. If it's not a good thing, drink more. It gets better. I promise. All right, so we're going to talk about some haunted places this evening and some haunted faces as well, as long as the stream holds out. So you guys keep your fingers crossed. If not, like I said, we will be moving to a pre-recorded show because I'm tired of pulling my freaking hair out with all the techie issues we're having. Let's see if it's going to let me actually scroll down and see any more of my comments. No, it's not. Of course not. Why would it do that? That would make life way too easy, wouldn't it? Okay, we're going to start out tonight in Ireland. Not such an old tale, but kind of. In 1832, this dude named Sir George Hodson, he was actually a knight by heredity. Got handed down to him. I'm not real sure how that works, but it's all good. Anyway, this place, Hollybrooke Hall, that he had built, is just south of Dublin. And it's one of these big, massive Gothic revival houses with huge arches and Tudor chimneys and this massive stained glass windows all over the place. It's absolutely beautiful. And of course, it was beautiful when it was first built. But as things like these do, generations pass and ownership gets handed down and changes hands, and these big, beautiful monuments start to crumble and looking like whodunit. So in 1987, this couple comes along, Kathy and Scott, and their teenage son decided they were going to buy the estate and start planning their renovations. Yeah, shake your head, folks. We know what happens when you go in and start renovating these old places, right? Yep, that's exactly what happened. So they're looking around and they're starting off by adding some bathrooms because, not really a whole lot of indoor plumbing back in the day when this joint was built. So they're going to add a few more linen or water closets, as they call them over there. So they're looking at this little nook. It's a very small room. Praise God. Kane's got a little Southern Baptist in him, I think. Anyway, they're looking at this little nook up on one of the second levels or third levels of this massive Gothic revival improvement. And they're deciding if they're going to make a bathroom there. So there's no plumbing, there's no electricity running this little room. They've got a whole lot of work to do. So they start picking up pieces, parts, and storing stuff in there. And they found this old tub. So they moved this tub in there. And a few weeks goes by, and they've got a few more of their pieces, parts, and they're ready to start working in there. So they go in there, and they notice this small round thing sitting on the side of that tub that they had stored in there. So Scott goes and he picks it up and he dusts it off. And when he did, he sees that it's in mint condition, this gold half sovereign coin dated in 1886. So, with many of these places, Hollybrooke also had a legend that the previous owners had hidden just a ton of wealth in the walls and floors of that home. And one of the other previous owners had damn near destroyed the place looking for all this hidden treasure, but he never found anything. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not, but that individual actually had plans of pretty much gutting the entire house and turning it into rentals. Well, Scott and Kathy started to wonder if maybe the house actually knew that, and that's why it never gave up any of the treasure to this previous owner. And then all of a sudden they look on their new tub and see this gold coin. Maybe the house kind of put it there as a thank you for coming in and fixing things instead of destroying it. Anyway, after that coin was found, all these other haunting phenomena began. The next experience they had was kind of crazy. So they're inside and they're working in the house, and this is before they actually moved in the house. And all of a sudden they hear this voice singing an old song. It's a long way to Tipperary. That's one of those way, way back in the day old folk songs. So the crazy thing with that was at the time, like I said, they weren't living there. There was no power in the house anywhere. And the song that they were hearing, the voice that they were hearing sounded like it was coming from an old gramophone recording. So a few weeks later, they move in and things really started getting active then. Now they'd hired this old housekeeper that she had worked there for 50 years in the past. Her name was Lucy. So she was already pretty much in tune with their paranormal activities that went on in that house. Well, one night they're sitting there chilling and they've got a guest over, and their cat Edgar starts acting crazy. He obviously had spotted something that scared the shit out of him. So he runs over and he starts cowering underneath Kathy's feet. And they start looking around trying to figure out what the hell this cat is so terrified of. Now they don't see anything, but the cat's eyes are glued on something that seemed like it was walking across the room. And whatever it was coming closer to Kathy and her guests, and of course Edgar, who's shaking underneath her shoes. So Kathy had never had any kind of paranormal experiences, but on the other hand, she wasn't really scared of ghosts either. So she addresses whatever it was that was apparently heading straight for him, and she told it that it was perfectly welcome there as long as it was friendly, but to please stop scaring her cat. Well, Apparently, whatever this thing was understood and submitted, because Edgar just kind of chilled out. Now, he was, of course, still looking all over the room for whatever it was that he had seen beforehand. But apparently, whatever this critter was, it just seemingly disappeared in mid stride as it was heading towards them. So as time goes on, they start to realize that the bulk of the activity is going on in the back bedroom. They could hear these footsteps and whistling and the sounds of a door opening and closing, even when that door was shut and locked. So one evening they had another guest over, and their guest was going to stay in that room since it was one of the very few that they actually had finished restoring. So the next morning, their guest comes downstairs and he reports that he heard footsteps and doors opening and closing all during the night. And he also stated that there was something that had stood in the corner and watched him all night long while he was sleeping. But he said he wasn't really scared of whatever it was. He kind of had a feeling that whatever it was that was there was just there kind of looking over him and didn't really mean him any harm. So, of course, there's a whole lot of different ghosts that manifest in this home, and one of them in particular that likes to make herself seen frequently is a woman that they call the Lady in Gray. Now, this chick's very elegant. She's always seen wearing this long gray skirt and this white blouse, and her hair's always wrapped up in a tight bun. Now, Scott was the first one to have seen her, at least in this ownership. He was sitting in the library across from the Great Hall, and from where he was sitting, there's a real good view of the grand staircase and the landing there. So he's doing his work, and he looks up because out of the corner of his eye, he sees somebody going up the stairs. So when he looks towards the stairs, he sees this lady in gray. And he watches her, and she's coming up the stairs, and as soon as she gets to the landing, she just vanished into thin air. Now, later on that same week, he sees her again, pretty much the same spot, but she's just kind of hovering on the stairs. And then when she passes through the archway that leads towards the master bedroom, she kind of vanished and faded into the woodwork. Now, a few days later, Lucy sees the same lady coming from out of the master bedroom. Now, neither Scott or Kathy had told her about the previous sightings that week. That's when Lucy came and informed Kathy that this hadn't been the first time she'd seen the Gray Lady. In fact, after having worked there for well over 50 years, she'd had quite a few encounters with ghosts there that called the Hollybrooke home as well. Now, one day, this old dude comes over to visit. He'd heard through the grapevine that somebody had purchased Hollybrooke and they were in there restoring it, so he wanted to go visit. This old dude actually grew up in the house, so you know he had some serious ghost stories to tell. So he's sitting there drinking a cup of coffee with Kathy, and he starts telling her that when he was little, he and his siblings would steer clear of the upstairs landing after dark because the nurse would run them off. Now, what he was referring to as the nurse was the spirit of a caretaker that once lived there at the estate. Apparently, there had been an elderly female family member that required 24/7 care, and that family member stayed in the back bedroom. The old man went on to say that the nurse was known to stand at the corner of the bedroom and watch over anybody who slept in there. So now their guest knows exactly who that was that was standing there staring at him while he was asleep that night. He had a nursemaid. Then, of course, as you would suspect, Sir George is seen there from time to time as well. Now, George was actually an amateur architect, amongst many other things, when the house was built. So he put his 2 cents in, and he actually designed a whole lot of the features of the estate house and a lot of the outbuildings that are there as well. So again, Scott's the first one to have an encounter with Sir George. So one afternoon, he's over there working in the hallway, and he's working on this outlet that's in a baseboard. And all of a sudden, he feels like somebody's kind of standing behind him, watching him. So he turns around and he looks over his shoulder, and he sees this small bearded man in antique clothing with his hands clasped behind his back. And he said the dude was just kind of standing there rocking back and forth on the balls of his feet, nodding and smiling while he was watching Scott work. And after a couple minutes, he vanished into thin air. Scott also added that it seemed the guy was happy that was watching him. He seemed to be very happy to see the house being restored. So, with Sir George being thrilled with the improvements that are being made to his old home, there were a whole lot of other examples of when Scott would be working on something or making repairs, and he'd show up with that same smile and a nod, kind of giving his approval on what was going on. Now, there was another real cool coinky dink that happened here. Um, Kathy went to this auction and she saw this era uh, oil painting that supposedly had been painted at the same time the house was being built, or somewhere around that same time. So she goes ahead and she buys it, she brings it home, and she hangs it on the second level, just down from the hall where the master bedroom is. So she's already in bed a couple nights later, and Scott's in the bathroom brushing his teeth, and he's just adjacent to where she is. And they hear these heavy footsteps going back and forth down the hallway toward the landing. So at first they thought it was their teenage son. So they get up and they go check in on Colin, I think his name was. And when they go to his room, they open the door and they see him out cold. Well, they settle back down in bed, and again, they start hearing these footsteps. So now Scott's getting paranoid, thinking somebody may have broke in. So he picks up a hockey stick that he had right there next to the bed, and he starts going room to room, checking everything out. Well, of course, he finds nothing. So they hear the footsteps again, just as they sound like they're right outside the bedroom door. Scott jerks the door open, and of course, there's nothing there, and the footsteps just stopped mid stride. Well, weeks later, a guest came to visit him, and when they saw the old painting, he asked Kathy where she'd found the Hodson painting. That's the one that she had just hung that she bought at the auction. So the guest actually wound up informing Kathy that Sir George Hodson had painted that portrait, and the female that was in the portrait was supposedly his daughter, Mariel Ann. That is pretty cool. She didn't even know that. So apparently, Sir George had been checking out his painting and was very happy that it had made its way home. Maybe he didn't approve with where it had been hung, but yeah, he definitely checked it out all night long after she got it hung there. Now, in 1988, Scott and Kathy decided that they were going to have the roof replaced. It had leaked really, really bad all winter long in several places. And their main concern was that they were concerned with the stability of the chimneys. There were 12 of them in all. They actually would have to be taken down layer by layer, reassembled with stainless steel liners, and then put back up. So, as the roofer started disassembling the first cluster of three chimneys, Scott and Kathy were getting ready to leave for vacation because they didn't really want to hang around with all that going on. So, as they're upstairs packing, they start noticing this sensation of agitation just growing around them. Now, even though this house had been really, really active, it had always felt peaceful. Given the unique background of the house, they began to wonder if it was becoming agitated because there were strange men up there swarming all over the roof and literally taking it apart. So Kathy goes downstairs and she has a talk with the house. Now, this may sound crazy to some people, but to us that are into the paranormal, yeah, we know that that was probably the exact thing she should have done at that time. So she tells the house and its occupants not to worry, that they're not being abandoned, that the roof is being repaired so that the house can be fully restored, that she loved the house and she wanted to make sure that it was perfect when they were finished with it. She then explained what was going on with the chimneys, and explained the process of taking them down and putting the stainless steel liners inside to make them fireproof so that the house wouldn't burn down like the Power Score home that burned down about 30 years prior. That was across the road within eyesight of Hollycrest. So, yeah, definitely the house seemed to have understood because by the time Kathy went back upstairs and started finishing up with her packing, that sense of agitation had pretty much vanished. It was kind of like the house and everything that had stuck around there. It kind of breathed a sigh of relief. So since then, they did accomplish fully restoring the home, but the economy started turning to shit over there, and they decided that they would sell the property and move back to the U.S. So Kathy and Scott, of course, missed the place a whole lot, and they hope that the now current owners are having a wonderful time there with all of the folks who have stuck around, the nurse, the previous owner, a couple children, from what I understand, uh, hoping that the house and the owners are treating each other equally respectfully. All right, so let's talk about another haunted mansion that was built by a dude named George. Yes, we're doing a George rundown tonight. This one is the Baleroy Mansion, and which is freaking awesome. It's got one hell of a haunted history. It's got 32 rooms, and it's actually in the Chestnut Hill Garden District of Philadelphia. It's packed full of thousands of antiques that were handed down from folks like Napoleon Bonaparte, General George Meade, and Thomas Jefferson, just to name a few. Now, this sucker had been documented as one of the most haunted places in the entire country, and it comes with an added little bonus. Yeah, it's got what has been dubbed the death chair. You guys may actually have heard that legend before. So they keep this creepy little bun warmer tucked away in an upstairs room that they call the Blue Room. This room is a major attraction here at the mansion, not just because of the chair, but because it's notorious for paranormal activity. Let me give you a little rundown on the history here. So, the Baleroy Mansion was built in 1911. It was last inhabited by the George Meade Easby family. Their parents actually bought the mansion in 1926. Now, George was a direct descendant of some of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He's the great grandson of General George Meade. That's the dude that defeated General Robert E. Lee at the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War. Just to give you a little history lesson there, folks. So, before his death in 2005, George claimed to have seen tons of apparitions in his lifetime there. He claimed that he had seen and/or experienced activity in every single room of this mansion and had been doing so since he was just a little boy. His very first encounter happened in the courtyard fountain when he was about 6 years old. He said him and his younger brother Stephen were looking into the fountain water and they were making faces and laughing at their reflection. And after a few minutes of them goofing off, shit got real for George. He was horrified when he saw that his brother's reflection had turned into a laughing skull, but his reflection was still normal. Well, even though he was just a little kid, he knew that this was an omen of Stephen's impending death. And come to find out, he was right because not very long after that, little Stephen did indeed die. Now, even though his body's gone, his childlike ghost is still hanging out at the mansion, even to this day. George said that he'd encountered his brother's ghost on many occasions through the years. But Stephen's spirit isn't the only one that's stuck around Baleroy. George, as well as countless other folks, have seen not only Stephen's little ghostly apparition, but there's also been encounters with his mother, Henrietta Easby, and Amelia, whose disembodied spirit usually appears as a foggy blue mist. Now, the ghost of Thomas Jefferson has also been known to appear beside the clock in the dining room, as well as the spirit of an old woman that walks with a cane that's been spotted on multiple occasions hanging out in the upstairs library. Now, family, friends, and guests were always being toyed with by these spirits when they were visiting. Not a whole lot of maliciousness going on there, maybe a little mischievousness, but not maliciousness. So it was never really uncommon to hear footsteps and phantom knocking, but it did get a little bit hectic from time to time when family and friends reported seeing unexplained flying objects hurling around the room. One day there was actually this big gathering there, and this copper pot comes flying like a missile from out of nowhere. It ended up pegging one of these respected ministers in the head. Over 20 people saw that go down. I'm thinking the dude must have been laying down one of those 20-minute Southern Baptist blessings, and the Spirit brought it to an abrupt end. Over the years, anyway, George also realized that there was yet another overbearing entity that was hanging out there. Now, this presence had a thing for clutching onto his arm. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for him. This dude had had a lifetime of paranormal experiences in this house, but he never really had gone public. So finally, he tells his trusted friend and fellow antique collector, Lloyd Gross, about all the crazy shit that he'd seen go down there. And he starts telling Gross about the things that had happened when he was a little boy. And other than the event with Stephen in the fountain, he'd come face to face with a number of ghosts, including his uncle. He said that this one evening he's laying in bed and his uncle just pops in and sits down on the bed beside him. This kid was terrified, and all he could do was lay there dreading what may come next. But even those experiences were pretty much harmless, though that would terrify a child. Might would raise the hairs on my neck as well. Um, he said that the ghosts always just kind of vanished as fast as they showed up, um, even though they left a pretty good impression in George's little young mind. Now, like I said, this joint was built in 1911, so there have been a ton of renovations and updates that have been made on this mansion over the decades. And like we said earlier, we know what happens when you start messing around with an old house. Yeah, there were a flurry of reports concerning paranormal activity and ghost sightings coming from there. Now, one afternoon, one of the workers, it was a restoration specialist named David Belts, he and one of his crew members actually witnessed Stephen's ghost. They said they saw his face pressed against the glass of an upstairs window, just standing there watching him while they're working in the courtyard. They said that Stephen's ghost was so vivid it looked just like a real kid. He was blonde haired, and he was just standing there with his hands on the windows, just staring down at him. And they said they kind of stared back up at him because they knew that there were no kids there. And after a couple seconds, Stephen just kind of faded away. Now, downstairs, the basement's another hot spot. Basements are always a hot spot when it comes to paranormal activity, right? Well, the folks that work there avoid the basement at all costs. It's creepy as hell to be in this dank, dark room. And if you hear these disembodied voices calling your name from the deepest depths of the darkened basement, it's going to scare the hell out of you. Even the brave folks go down there looking for these culprits, trying to figure out who's calling them out by name, but they never find anything. They only come back reporting that they had this overwhelming sensation of being smothered, followed by a surge of you ain't wanted down here, pulsing through their veins. Now, everywhere inside and outside this entire mansion seems to have some kind of paranormal activity going on, but it's the reports of encounters in the blue room that draws a crowd. Now, this blue room is home to the cursed blue chair we just talked about. A lot of paranormal investigators believe that a female ghost haunts that chair due to a deadly curse caused by insanity. George himself dubbed the overactive spirit that lives in the blue room Amelia. Amelia is the one that shows up as a blue mist that kind of comes up from out of nowhere. And anybody that dares sit their ass down in her chair while she's present will soon meet their demise. Now, there's been 4 people stupid enough to test her patience. One of them was a former Baleroy curator that actually knew better but did it anyway. This idiot tempted fate and sat his ass down in that blue chair, and well, as the curse states, not one of them are now living to tell about it. The blue mist has been captured on film and is often seen when 2 or more people are present. Amelia likes an audience. Several folks have had this shit scared out of them in Ms. Easby's bedroom, too. One time during a charity event, Lloyd Gross led a reporter up there on a tour of the mansion. Well, when they get upstairs, they found out that Henrietta's ghost was not in the mood for company. So the journalist walks in the room and his tape recorder was yanked out of his hand, flung across the room. And although neither of those two men saw Henrietta, there was no doubt in either of their minds what had just gone down. So, of course, they all asked back downstairs where everybody else is. And after they settled down for a little bit, the reporter got the hell out of there, period. He stayed, Gross stayed with the charity group for the rest of the evening. He had, of course, become a little bit more acquainted with some of the spirits around there because of George. Now, the mansion, of course, is no stranger to other paranormal activity, too. That includes lights mysteriously turning on and off and doors opening and closing by themselves. And George actually stated in an interview that the electrical fields in the house attract lightning and the electricity goes off and on for no reason. And this is really cool, too, y'all. Just before George died, he was led to an old desk by his mother's ghost. And hidden in that desk drawer, he finds a letter written by his father that stated, I was brought up not to believe in ghosts and to trust only what science can explain. However, I have seen the ghosts and there is no reason to be afraid. A lot of the folks think that most of the ghosts and paranormal activity in the mansion are stemming from the antiques that are there in the estate. George pretty much spent most of his life as a major art and antique collector, and he wound up inheriting over 100,000 antiques and personal items, many of which had been in his family for centuries, that just kind of made their way home. That's pretty cool. Kind of like that painting, right? Actually, I saw a picture of, a picture of that painting. Hodgson had some skills. Either Hodgson had some pretty decent skills, or I don't know. The daughter, back in the day, women, most of them just kind of looked like men with their hair in buns and yeah, man buns. No, she wasn't very attractive, but the painting itself was pretty good. Okay, so changing the subject now. I'm going to be cursed because I'm talking about this dude's painting, his handiwork. I'd love to see the comments. I'm sure someone is shaming me, but it's not letting me do that. Let's see if maybe it'll let me do it now. Oh, somewhat. Hey, Janice, Ronnie, and Lori Owens are in the house. Hey, Sandra's here as well. Antonio, my boy, haven't heard from you in a while. There's my boy Glenn Harrison from Hardcore Paranormal. Miss Karen as well from Hardcore Paranormal. Thank you guys for joining in. Cindy, nice to see you this evening. Stephen Bev Martin. Of course, my redhead sister Glenn Culbertson's in the house. What flavors the moonshine tonight, sweetheart? Hey, Stacy, glad to see you as well. Wild Bill is in the house. Hey, Wild Bill. Hey, Leanne. Hopefully the feed is looking better for you this week. Kind of looks like it's trying to work with me. I don't trust it though. Hey, Susie. Susie Jones, my girl. I'm loving those videos you put up with the puppies. That is freaking awesome. They found water bottles. Hannibal used to love water bottles. All right, I think I pretty much got all of you guys. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. I'll try to go back later and check you guys out. While I do have a bunch of y'all in the house, I'm going to spout out my idea. You guys put something in the comments. Because of all the technical issues with Facebook and YouTube and the internet and whatever the hell else it is that's giving me grief, I'm thinking about pre-recording this show and playing it at 7 o'clock on Facebook, and that way I can join in with you guys in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on that, if you think that's a good idea or not. Hopefully that would resolve a lot of the technical issues, and that way I can kind of sit there and bullshit with you guys on the side and maybe answer some questions that I don't always see while I'm in the middle of going down these stories. All right, so next up, have you ever heard of the Radiant Boys? No, it's not some lame ass wannabe boy band. Y'all know me better than that by now, right? Now, the Radiant Boys originate from German lore. And these glowing child spirits are said to have been murdered by their own mothers or stepmothers. Now, back in the day when these legends actually originated, it seemed to be a fairly common occurrence, unfortunately. So, when I first started my research on the Radiant Boys, I was thinking, were these women insane or was it postpartum or what the hell was going on with them? Well, that may have been the case in a few of these select instances, but it wasn't the most common reason they were doing that. Now, desperation was the most common factor when the mother plotted the murder of their own offspring, whether it be to avoid the shame of bearing a child out of wedlock, down to just not being able to provide food and shelter for another hungry mouth. And then there was also the desperation to retain wealth. Now, this is where the murdering stepmothers come in for the most part. So, back in the 1700s, if a man died and he still had living children from a previous marriage, they were the ones that would inherit the estate, not the widow. So, as you can imagine, lots of stepmothers started offing those kids. It was so common in this era, in fact, that two very well known fairy tales were based off the premise: Hansel and Gretel and Sleeping Beauty. Think about it, kiddos. So, the Radiant Boys, once known in German legend as Kindermorderen, are seen most often in Germany, of course, but also in Cumberland and Northumberland. That's in England, folks. That's because there were a whole lot of German immigrants that moved over there, and they shared their heritage and belief with the locals. So, let me tell you a little bit more about these creepy little kids. They're said to appear scantily clothed, and they glow so brightly that they look like they're on fire. They appear in full form, but only stick around for just a second or so before they disappear into thin air, as ghosties usually do. Now, here's the kicker, ghost hunters. Do not go looking for these ghostly little kids. Now, y'all know I'm all about ghost hunting and paranormal research, but there's more to it than just these little radiant boys. These little bastards are known to be harbingers of doom. Now, the upside of these encounters means that you're going to soon stumble onto some good luck and sometimes be extremely successful. The downside is you're probably going to die violently as soon as you find that success. So, I ran across a ton of documented encounters with these evil little kids, but I think the most noteworthy of the lot is this story. Now, a once very well known Englishman known as Captain Robert Stewart had an encounter with a Radiant Boy. So he's on this hunting trip in Ireland and he lost track of time, and daylight gave way to darkened skies, and the captain was soon lost in the woods. So he stumbles across this little country cottage and he knocks on the door in search of refuge. Well, the owner, already hosting a house full of guests, goes ahead and invites him in and tells his servant to go and make a room for him. So the servant leads Stewart into this large room that appeared to have been neglected for a very long time. After the servant lights a massive fire in the fireplace, he leaves the captain alone to get some rest for the night. Well, Stewart's exhausted, so he falls asleep like immediately. Well, a few hours later, he wakes up because he sees this bright, blaring light. Well, he thinks it's probably the light coming from the fireplace, so he rolls over towards the hearth to make sure the fire wasn't getting out of control, and he sees that the fire had long since burned out. So where the hell's all this light coming from, right? So Stewart rolls back over and he looks above him toward the ceiling where the source of light seemed to be coming from, and guess what he saw? Yeah, this glowing boy ghost was hovering above him, just floating in midair, staring down directly at him. And then all of a sudden, the little dude disappears. Well, apparently Stewart was really tired because the story doesn't say anything about him freaking the hell out or anything. As a matter of fact, the legend picks up when he's leaving the next morning. Captain's got brass balls, right? So anyway, he mentions the boy ghost to the owner as he's leaving. The owner immediately calls for the servant that had led him to that room, and when questioned, the servant admitted that he had led Stewart to the haunted room. But he defended himself by stating that he lit a really big fire in the fireplace to keep the ghost away. Well, the owner is pissed. He then explained to Stewart that the room had been off limits because it had been haunted by the ghost of one of his ancestors. Of course, that ancestor had been murdered by his demented mother. He then warned Stewart that when this ghost appeared, it meant that the one who had seen it would rise to great power and then die a violent death. So the captain kind of laughs it off and he goes on about his way. Well, shortly after he returns home, Stewart actually winds up becoming the Viscount Castlereagh because his older brother suddenly dies in this horrible, unexplainable accident. Well, he then left the military and he becomes involved in politics, in which he did quite well. He served as the British Foreign Security during the Napoleonic Wars. He also served as the leader of the House of Commons. Though he'd been very successful in climbing up the ranks, he was very unpopular as well. So after several years, the pressures of his position finally got to him and he started losing his mind. Well, in 1822, he committed suicide by slicing his own throat open. And there's another well known Radiant Boy legend, the Blue Boy. This kid wasn't murdered by his mother, though. His death was way worse than that. Legend states that the Blue Boy was found in possession of some documents that were given to him by the aristocrat that was in possession of the Chillingham Castle. And we've talked about that castle. There's some crazy shit that goes on there. So the documents were supposed to be given to the Spanish Armada in order to keep them from defeating the English. Well, as you've already figured out, the documents never made it to the castle, made it out of the castle. The boy was walled up inside a passageway while he was still alive. While there were some renovations that were going down in 1920, they found this little boy's bones after they had pulled down part of that wall. And his bones, of course, were covered in shards of blue fabric from his clothes. The tips of all of his finger bones were missing. So, assumably, this little kid had tried desperately to claw himself out of his wall grave. So it's been reported for centuries there at Chillingham that at the stroke of midnight, you can hear the harrowing cries of the Blue Boy echoing down the stone passageway adjacent to the castle's pink room. When the last of his cries fade away, it's said that a bright halo of light appears near a four-poster bed, and if you're lucky enough to be the one sleeping in that bed, you'll see the ghost of a small boy dressed in blue, illuminated by a bright halo of light. Blue Boy is actually said to approach the bed and stare at whoever's laying in it, but only for a moment. And then he walks away and disappears into the very wall that he was discovered buried behind. One more little story I'm going to do for you tonight. Looks like the stream may actually be holding up. Probably shouldn't have said that out loud. I just damned it to hell. So there's this little boneyard in Candlemaker Row, Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, they've been putting corpses in the ground here since the 1600s, so it's like one of the oldest cemeteries in Edinburgh. At the entrance, there's this etching that reads, Non omnis moriar, which means not all of me will die. Very fitting slogan that seemingly warns visitors there of poltergeists that they call the Greyfriars Kirkland home. Now, this poltergeist in particular was known in his human form as Lord Advocate George McKenzie, otherwise known as Bloody McKenzie. This dude was a brutal and vicious prison warden that got his jollies from torturing the over 400 inmates that he oversaw. Now, a lot of those inmates that died either by his hand or under his watch are buried in the Black Mausoleum section of the Covenanters prison. And McKenzie, when he bit it, was buried only yards away from the prison itself, which unwittingly tied him to the grounds where he had tormented so many. McKenzie's ghost has a reputation of being malevolent, and he's known to attack visitors. Things had gotten so bad that the city council closed the cemetery to the public for a while. That's pretty serious, right, y'all? So try like over 400 reported cases of McKenzie's annex, which had been reported to the authorities. These reports included cold spots, being scratched, being bruised, even faintings, but it wasn't always McKenzie that haunted Kirkland. There have been tons of other reports for centuries. Folks have reported seeing the shadowy figures of those that are buried there, and some have even heard their tormented wailing. McKenzie has basically been at peace for centuries, but something disturbed him, and whatever it was pissed him the hell off. The locals are still circulating this tale, and they'll all agree this was the something that set McKenzie on his tirade. So it's storming one night, and this vagrant decides he's going to break the lock on the mausoleum gate and go inside to get out of the rain. So he starts looking around at the surrounding coffins, and either out of boredom or some macabre sense of curiosity, he breaks one open just to see what was inside. What the hell would you think would be inside a coffin? Anyway, yeah, he gets this section of the vault, and unfortunately, that was McKenzie's relatives. So, as you've already guessed, the shit hits the fan. Immediately after this bum starts digging around in the coffin, it's said that the floor of the mausoleum collapsed and the bum falls into the deep, dark pit that was directly below. So, what do you think was down in that pit? I can tell you right now, it wasn't a Tupperware party, y'all. This pit was filled with the still decaying bodies of plague victims that had been thrown in and quickly sealed up to prevent the disease from spreading. So this dude is now wallowing around in corpse gunk, rotten meat, and rancid human bones. It's a party now, right? So this poor bastard manages to clamber his way out of the pit of these decomposing people, and he hauls ass out of the cemetery, passing a man that was walking his dog. Terrified the shit out of that dude. Well, after the pit was resealed, the mausoleum was fenced off and closed off to the public, but activity wasn't just restricted to the vault at that point. In the year 2000, a priest named Colin Grant was brought in to perform an exorcism on the entire cemetery. After several hours, Grant admitted that he had become overwhelmed by the mounting numbers of tormented souls there. He ended the rite abruptly and left, and shortly afterward, Grant passed away. That's kind of sad. He at least gave it a shot, right? All right, folks. So hopefully everything went well tonight. I will come back later on and check some of the comments, see what you guys think about doing a pre-recorded show, because I just don't trust this feed anymore, and I'm tired of saying the F word. My puppy's going to walk around saying the F word. All right. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you all, always, for all of your love and support, and a big shout out to HCP for everything you guys do for me. I will see you back here next week at 7 Central and 8 Eastern Time. In the meanwhile, if you guys have a story or some history you'd like to hear about, shoot me a message. Yes, I love to take requests. That's how I find out about all kind of cool stuff. See, I never knew about Bachelor's Grove Cemetery until Stacy Abernathy told me to look into it. And wow, there's some crazy shit going on there, right, Stacy? All right, folks, thank you again. Hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I will see you back here again next week. Creepy chick kisses coming at y'all.